So, I mean, obviously this is now no longer just a side hustle or a try at a side hustle for you, because you are somewhat famous within the blade community, I'm sorry.
No, it's definitely, progressed through from a hobby to something that was semi-serious. And then I was fortunate enough to get a casting call for a show called Forged in Fire.
Okay.
It's on the History Channel, and the Headhunter's Revenge episode.
I love the name
Yeah,
already.
it was something that I was not ready for at all, being the fact that you have about 40 people behind the cameras and there's 4 forges going at once, and you have all these television lights on you, and I think I went through like 3 shirts.
All right, everyone. Today I am here with graphic designer, bladesmith extraordinaire, and one of the most famous individuals I've ever sat across the table with. I mean, I'm going to need an autograph for sure. So, Jordan Kepler, everyone, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I'm really excited you're here. I'm also a little nervous about the stories I'm about to tell, but that's okay. But yeah, so I think we kind of, our backstory is a little bit from the overland off-road outdoor adventure space.
Yep.
And I was, in preparation for this, was thinking back to some of our, like, when did we meet? When was those first interactions?
That's what I was trying to remember too. I think, was it the KC family trip, the Road to Overland Expo?
Yeah, with 511,
yeah,
right?
with 511 and Nick from Rome.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yes, because that was our quesadilla night, which I think just weirdly solidified, I think, our friendship forever.
Yeah, I think so. It was
around quesadillas.
I was a little nervous if I had upset you, because you were just about to go to bed and me and Nick were trying to be
Let's back that up. Wait, you thought you upset me?
Well, no, we were sitting there like we were still hungry, me and Nick, so sitting there, and then all of a sudden I think it was maybe midnight.
Yeah.
And so we started the griddle back up and we were starting to make quesadillas, and then next thing you know, like I hear this of the tent, and we're like, oh shit. And she's like, okay, can you guys make me one now?
Well, we had camped in that little canyon and we were like on top of each other. So the way my tent pops out, like kind of put it right next to the bed of your truck. And that was when you had the Silverado, right?
Yeah, so at the Silverado, it was, let's see, I had like a homemade pull-out drawer. And
because you were the first Blackstone griddle I'd ever seen out on the trail. Because those are, while yours, it was small, it was like a more portable version. They're beefy.
And and I actually found that, and that's what I built the entire deck system out of wood in the back of my truck around. And like
really light, right? The whole thing
super
was really
light, but full-size world.
Right.
So
you can handle it. You didn't go to school for any of that or have that as a background. That's just been kind of a curiosity that's turned into a...
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like, I was always building stuff growing up and everything, and, whittling my own knives in Oregon, up in Lapine, like kind of where I learned to fish and all that stuff, and build my own bike jumps and all that. And then fast forward a few years, and I'm at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and I did industrial technology there for my major, and they gave me the keys to $100,000 CNC mills and casting equipment and welding and all this stuff. So I got to put my hand in a bunch of different stuff. And once I entered the adult world out of college and started making money, I got to buy my own tools.
It's been interesting to watch your progression and I guess I highlight the vehicle build is because I think something that we've been watching you do for the last couple of years is this square body thing that's actually finally taking shape.
It looks like a truck.
And I say finally. You've been building this thing by hand, so this takes time. And
it's not sad, but I'm like so itching at getting back and camping because I went down the rabbit hole. It was a dream project to build a 73 crew cab square body. I have it caged, new axles, new tires. I learned to paint. I learned to fabricate. I learned all this different stuff. I've basically just been teaching myself step by step, YouTube mechanic kind of thing on this truck, and it seems to look decent so far. Yeah. I don't know if on first startup everything's going to explode, but...
Well, that's the excitement of it, right? There's a little adventure everywhere.
Yeah.
When you first started, I mean, I guess from my perspective, we've seen everybody start a massive build project, and very rarely do they come to completion. Just because I don't like you're saying, like you don't quite realize all the ins and outs until you get, neck deep into something, and now it's like, oh man, I don't have the time for this anymore.
And it's just been a fun progression too, from like the Silverado, the 2017, and understanding what its capabilities are and everything, and then getting to a point where I'm sure you've seen my driving style off-road, but that truck wasn't going to last very long. How I was driving.
Between you and Nick, I'm going to stand here and watch.
Pretty sure there's a story we can get into later, but I think I cracked a ball joint sometime with you in the car, but that's fine.
Yes, oh, gosh, we have so many good stories. Yes, we're going to talk about that.
But getting rid of that truck and going for something that should just be bulletproof, hopefully, in theory. Mm-hmm.
Well, the great thing is you can fix it if it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And I know every single part of that truck.
You know it all. Kind of, I guess, doubling back to our inaugural trip together. I know that was on the road to Expo.
Yep.
Which we keep jokingly talking about this, just like Overland Prom, where like the entire community of off-roaders and Overland-esque people show up in the middle of Flagstaff.
That whole trip was so much fun. It was on a trail. What was it called? The Bradshaw Trail?
Yeah.
Almost 100 miles of dirt.
Yeah, it's like one of the most remote trails in California, I think.
Yeah.
And you go along like a military base or an old bombing range
or
something.
It was so cool.
Yeah, that was cool. That was also the trip you lost your camera.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Everyone at Expo, it's like they always have the parties after and everything like that. And at the time, I was shooting photos for KC the whole time and a couple other companies. And then I was like, "Where's my camera? And I remember like alerting everyone.
Right.
And
the whole expo was looking for Jordan's camera.
It ended up being in my passenger seat of my car. So. Yeah.
I love that. When you came over, I'm like, dude, did you find the camera? And you're like, it was in my truck. Anyway.
Yeah.
Those moments. Okay. We were young kids back then. Okay, so let's get back to you tinkering. We obviously know the vehicle exists. And so do you have a timeline for when that's going to be done or a goal that you'd like?
I've had timelines and they've been pushed out. I just officially dropped my first 6.0 LS engine into the truck. At this point, it'd be fun to be driving it before winter comes.
Okay, it'll be ready when
it's a great skateboard right now, though.
Good.
Yeah, Flintstone of it.
It's just pedaling. Okay, please make a meme about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the build going. You've also had this knife making career. Are you official? Like, do you get to officially call yourself a blacksmith with what you've done?
Yeah, you can say blacksmith. There's also like a more niche bladesmith that they call it. A blacksmith definitely knows a little bit more about ornate work and stuff like that. But a bladesmith is, you're kind of more into the heat treatment and metallurgy and, just shape of an all-around blade. So.
Okay. And all of that has been, you've taught yourself in a sense.
Basically, yeah. So I guess the tip of where all the knives started was, about 7 years ago, I tore my meniscus, and I had already been starting to build up the Silverado. And so I was pretty bored in the afternoons, just not being able to move anywhere. And so I'd always had this idea, like, I want to make my own knife, big old, Rambo style Bowie or something like that. And I knew some of the stuff from Cal Poly, all the heat treatment and what steels to use. And I had a few power tools and whatnot, and ended up making a fun little Bowie that was pretty interesting shaped. But it was out of I got a tool steel. So it was like, when I hardened it, it was like literally like I could whittle pieces of metal off with it, which was super fun to experience going through and making a pretty decent blade where I really liked it. I could, chop into wood. I could baton through wood for making campfires, and then you can go and cook with it. And so it was just a lot of fun. And as I was going on more and more camping trips, buddies were like, "Hey, I want one of those," and I'd be showing off, because I made it and all this stuff. And so more and more friends started wanting knives, and I started trying to figure out how to make it a business, like a side hustle kind of business, and slightly escalated from there.
What is it about our community and knives? I mean, we obviously have a survival mindset in some ways because we do get out pretty far, and I think that probably just we understand tools, we like tools, but
Yeah.
it is amazing to watch people just totally geek out with you. I mean, that's got to be a little piece of what makes this fun, because you are sharing this with the community.
Yeah, and it's so much fun, teaching people, all the different aspects of how easy of a hobby it is to get into it, and how deep you can get into it in terms of the artistry and the metallurgy and everything. And yeah, it definitely also goes along well with all the guys coming up to me with the stories where it's like, well, I saw Sasquatch out, so I get the knife makers and I get the Sasquatch hunters, and it's great. And story time.
Okay, can that please happen when we're at the booth this year? I really want that to happen. I want to talk about Sasquatch.
Back in '87.
Really, you get this?
All the time. I love
my
it.
gosh.
I love it.
I feel like that's its own podcast. Let's talk about Sasquatch. So, I mean, obviously this is now no longer just a side hustle or a try at a side hustle for you, because you are somewhat famous within the blade community. I'm sorry.
No, it's definitely, progressed through from a hobby to something that was semi-serious, and then I was fortunate enough to get a casting call for a show called Forged in Fire.
Okay.
It's on the History Channel, and the Headhunter's Revenge episode.
I love the name already.
Yeah, it was something that I was not ready for at all, being the fact that you have about 40 people behind the cameras, and there's 4 forges going at once, and you have all these television lights on you, and I think I went through like 3 shirts.
Let's define what a forge is, because while I understand kind of the basic principles of what it is, I think there's got to be qualifying factors that make it a forge. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so it's pretty much all contained temperature, right? So it's like, how hot can you get this little area? And so there's a lot of different designs and everything like that, or different fuels that you can use, but it's basically a little area that you can get up to 2,000 plus degrees.
And is the fuel,
Fuel can be propane, it can be coal, it could be coke, just another form of coal. But yeah, there's all different types of ways to get your blade nice and red and hot.
Crazy. Okay, well, there we go. Got some definition on that one.
The show was absolutely amazing. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, there was directions and stuff, and I kept messing up, or they were laughing slightly about how much I like to smile when the camera's on me, which you can probably tell already.
That's a bad thing?
No, they liked it, but I think my nickname at the end of it was Smiley.
Okay.
Our whole episode was all based off of time, and they kept taking time away from us.
Okay.
And then we had to chop into clocks and different stuff. And it was super cool how they set it up. The last axe that they have you made was the Headhunter's axe.
Okay.
And it had a concaved blade on one side with a giant spike on the other. And the whole thing had to be like about 2 pounds. So it was a pretty slender thing. And I remember when I finished, I was just like, this doesn't seem like it's going to hold up very good, just because of how thin the whole thing had to be.
Had you ever made something like that before?
Never.
Okay, so this was completely...
And that was the fun, like when I got the casting call, they were like, have you ever made a sword? And they were like, you better practice, kind of thing on the interview. And no, but the whole Forged in Fire thing was crazy, and they chopped into a cattle skull and bamboo rods and all kinds of stuff.
So they actually test the blade to see this for strength.
Yeah, and who was it? David Baker did not hold back on that, and it's the real
television.
deal.
We gotta make it. If it's gonna explode, we've got to make it big, right?
At the end of one of the second rounds, my hands were cramping from basically being on the grinder for such a long, intense period of time. I remember the medic kept looking at me, and my hand was just kind of stuck. And I kept having to push it down. I'm like, I'm fine. Yeah. But no, it's everything that like a major TV show that you can expect, kind of thing. And I only got the medic actually called on me once for hitting a drill bit on me.
Oh.
Yeah, which was like, he came in like, medic. Came on, and he was like, I was like, what? And he's like, wiped it, put a little Band-Aid on it. He's like, okay, he's good. I was like...
You had to justify his job.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything, I know how those, editing and, you shoot hours and hours of footage, and then they obviously fine-tune what's going to make it. Is there anything that you were bummed or just wished you would have seen in the final product?
I guess that's a little bit of I mean, maybe it's just the nature of it being basically an hour show. And, it's not only the first section is this massive 14-inch recurve blade that we made, but the last section, which is only 20 minutes of the show or something like that, is 3 days of making this crazy epic axe. And yeah, there was like a few things that never really aired that I had details in or I was like really proud of. One of which was, so it was an axe, and to connect that top piece of steel onto the handle, you had to make sure that it was secure. And a lot of times you put a collar around. And, the easy way would have just been to maybe put a tube sleeve or something on there. But what was fun, I went for it. I made the tooling, and I actually forged out another piece of Damascus flat and then rolled it up around itself. And then I made a tool to go in and then forge welded that seam together. And then I brought all the Damascus out, and if you look close, you can actually see the collar of the axe is all raindrop Damascus down there.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty
so
fun.
cool. And I didn't make it?
No.
Yeah. You're like, dude.
Yeah, I keep telling you, look at right there.
That's the thing I did.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Well, you did it.
Yeah.
So you did that, but then I feel like this has transitioned for you where you're, like you said, you went to school and you got a lot of information in school, but you were doing something that wasn't knife making prior to this.
Yeah, and so coming out of school, it was like Cal Poly was great. I learned so many different skills. Their whole aspect is learned by doing, and so it was from getting hands-on work with different machines to using the actual industry software that all these people use. I got pretty decent at some 3D CAD drawing stuff, which then translated pretty nicely into getting a job after college in graphic design. 2D and 3D were it was not too hard to go pick up some Photoshop and Illustrator stuff. And yeah, that was where I was, mainly working all the way up until about March 1st, and then went full-time knife making.
So you jumped into
Yeah,
this. I love this. So what was the transition like, or what was that process of going from like a more traditional 9-to-5 to now you are your own boss, you're doing the bladesmithing thing? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely still learning it. I mean, realizing how many hours and consecutive days that I can actually swing a hammer is going to be a learning curve.
Is one side bigger than the other?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty soon. It's like
Just one
full
side's
on Popeye, yeah. But no, it's, every morning I wake up and that was the biggest thing. It's like I dream about making knives, and every morning now I can get up and go make knives.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that we really either have the luxury or just have the situational, just have the environment that lets us really find what we're passionate about. I think those of us that have been able to do that, I think really treasure that as like, this doesn't happen to everybody.
Yeah.
And so you value it. But to see that you've had this love for something and enjoyed it so much, because I've watched you share it with people countless times, and then to actually take the leap, because not everyone can do that, and not everyone is willing to do it.
And there's a certain aspect of like taking the leap, but then also having, stars align kind of. Right. And, I was fortunate enough to like have been gaining these different skills like that have allowed me to start my own business, do my own logos and photography and all this stuff. So these skills have, saved me a lot of money in terms of starting a business and everything. And, metallurgy and off-roading, and it just kind of all comes together into this cool industry that we have, and I get to share it with people who can geek out as much about knives with me. So no,
it's super cool. So you're selling knives for a living. So you're making and selling knives.
Yeah, I am selling knives. I've been going through doing different hand-forged blades, which is super fun. How the metal moves when it's hot, when it's super red hot, and every hammer strike, the different ways you have to isolate parts of the blade, and forging out the tip and keeping the grain structure and everything correct throughout it. And then you get into the heat treat that you always see on Forged in Fire, where they dip the blade, into the oil and the big fireball, and
and you always make sure although I haven't seen a fireball. Is fireball not good?
My neighbors don't like the fireball as much, but every once in a while.
Try to keep the fireballs down.
But no, it's fun. It's just so mesmerizing, the heat treat and just moving those giant pieces of hot steel, especially when you're making the Damascus and stuff, when you have those big billets of steel and you're moving it under either the hydraulic press or the power hammer. sometimes my own arm. And the one thing on that is like, you know, how you kind of don't really understand what the exact pattern of the blade's going to be all the time. And that's one thing. It's like, it's even hard to understand for me sometimes is I'll go and I'll do something and I'll be like, yeah, I think it's going to turn out like this. And then I etch the blade and I'm like, nope, that didn't turn out like that. But it's always a cool pattern. It's organic and it's,
I guess, yeah, so the organic, like you are, because since you're working with kind of organic matter that's going to do its own thing, and in these circumstances, I think that maybe that's why I like it. There's a fingerprint almost on every piece that you do.
You can, you know, lead a horse to water kind of mentality on it, but the final blade is always going to be slightly different. There's never going to be a similar one. There's never going to be another one in the entire world. Some guys use coal or coke or other fires for, like, you know, actual blacksmiths. But
wait, explain coke.
Coke is, you know, I haven't even got into it too much myself. I believe coke is just like a super purified type of coal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not the other type of
not
coke.
Not white coke. No.
Not Coca-Cola. That was where my brain went.
Sorry, of course I went to.
No, but there's that's what a lot of blacksmiths use when they do all the ornate stuff, because that gets so much hotter.
Okay.
And
is it consistent, like a more consistent burn?
Yeah, and it's a different type of heat, and it's really cool. I've always wanted to try and start getting into that, but there's definitely.
Next time we talk, we'll hear about how your Coke experience.
Yeah, maybe in the back of the square body.
Yeah, do it. I love it. Well, because we watched you progress in this. I mean, with everything, you've done such a great job in the world of social media, which is obnoxious at best sometimes. I'm a part of it, so I'm totally calling myself out. But you've done such a good job of, like, bringing everyone along on this, and it's such an interesting thing. And you haven't been afraid of not highlighting a mistake, but, like, you've shown the learning process of where you've gone, or the equipment game, like, because you started out with a lot more manual labor, where it was taking you tens of hours to produce a knife.
Yeah, getting into the different minute details of blades is so much fun, where you can have a blade that'll take me maybe a day and a half to finish, and it's fun. You kind of go through it. It's a very rugged kind of style blade, and then you can get into blades where I have one where I'm 16 days into it. Ooh. And it's like about 12 days just to make the steel on it, and that's when you're taking those different layers of basically different alloys that have different properties, layering them together, and when you get them hot enough and clean enough, and then you hit them together, they forge weld together, and they basically become a homogeneous piece. But they maintain those lines in the blade.
And is that what we're seeing with, like, a Damascus blade with all of the like swirling, for lack of a better word? Yeah,
and so Damascus is kind of, I guess, the style of folding, the different types of metal into each other.
Right.
So if you can imagine it, if you're, let's say one time you draw it out and you cut it into 3, and then you do it again, you stack it out, forge weld it out, and then the next time maybe you twist it as you're doing it, or you re-square it so it's different orientation and all that. It's just the combination of that, and however you want to put it together is how you get all those crazy patterns and everything. And
I feel like you see some artists, and I feel like you see kind of a visual representation when you see, like, clay work. Yeah. When people, like, chop up, like, a bunch of different colors of clay, and then and you see it's still maintaining some of its individuality in that piece, but you're seeing the movement.
And one of my favorite things to always show on Instagram is that trips people out the most, and you kind of get an understanding of it, is when the blade is fully forged out into shape and sanded down, it looks like a completely regular blade, because when the steels are sanded, you can't see anything, but because they're different alloys, they have different properties, you dip it in that acid at the end, and then you pull it out, and it actually eats away at one of the steels and leaves the other steel normal, so you get peaks and valleys.
There we go.
And that's where you get
that look.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I still don't understand all that. But I think, again, you presented it in such a way that, like, I've learned a massive amount of stuff about knives, and it was really fun. So a couple years ago, I forgot about this.
Yep.
How did I forget about this? I snapped a coil on my suspension, which is, I've been told, impossible. But so I'd snapped that piece, and I think it was kind of early on, and I think you kind of said you probably would never do this again with somebody.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those calls like, I think I can do it.
I was like, well, let's try.
I think also at the time I was doing it completely by hand, so that might have been the reason. I was like, all right, that was a lot of forging for a little knife.
Well, so you basically were taking this piece of metal, this piece of steel.
Yep.
And so was it a pure enough piece? I mean, because obviously that piece of metal was never intended to be a knife. Is there going to be?
So why we were able to use that piece was it was actually because it's your coil spring. Mm-hmm. It's what's called a spring steel. So they heat treat those coils so that it maintains its shape. It doesn't deform when you go through it. And that's what, like, if you were to use mild steel on a coil spring, it would just and then like never come back.
Okay.
So I took that little section that you gave me, drew it out straight, and then forged it down as flat as I possibly could. And then we layered a couple different other pieces of steel onto it just to give it that layered kind of topographical map style on it. And yeah, that was a fun blade. And I was really excited when it all actually welded together.
It actually looked like a knife. It's actually a knife. No, that was so cool. And that was like kind of the first, I don't know, interaction where I actually got to be a part of. I never knew I would know somebody where I could be like, can you make me a knife with this piece of metal? So that was really cool. And that's something that's in my kit in the van right now.
Yeah, that works.
So in your blade making career, start to finish, how many blades do you think you've made?
Oh, I'm probably closing in on 1,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 1,000 knives?
Yeah.
But do you have a favorite somewhere in there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the more recent ones that I've been making that are just so intricate. You know, I've got a blade that is, I have 16 days just into the single blade, and I think 12 just making the steel alone. There's 2,400 layers of steel. So if you imagine starting with 40.
I can't imagine that.
Folding it, doubling, you get up to like these numbers, and the blade is, it's all mosaic Damascus, hidden tang, and then I inset a piece of ceremonial piece of turquoise on the butt cap. And finishing it and realizing that I didn't screw up in any part, I was like, yeah, that was a cool feeling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What does being a successful blacksmith or bladesmith look like for you? I'm assuming that's probably different for everybody, but what would be your goal, or what would you like to accomplish that would make you feel like this is where I want to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay, that's valid.
No, but I mean, I guess it's every opportunity that I can possibly get to, make specialty knives for people, or really fun choppers and ones that you can just beat the crap out of. And then I'm just coming out with a line where it's the survival knife I've been selling for a little while now, which is fun because it kind of takes me back to some of the stuff I've learned from Cal Poly and the manufacturing and everything of it, where I'm designing one where I can get the exact shape of the handle and the tip of the blade cut out, and it's one that I'm grinding down and finishing everything on. But in the handle, I've been using like a little storage cavity in there.
Okay.
And you can actually put about 15 feet of fishing line and 2 fishing hooks in the handle. And then you can put them on with flathead screwdrivers so that, like, if shit hits the fan in the real world and you have to figure out how to survive
just
or
your knife.
do something.
That's
It's just your knife. It's in there. You start a fire, you can fish, you can hunt if you're like really gnarly.
Yeah. I think I'm going to work into that one.
Yeah. But it's
So is that something, if you're ramping up something for production, is that something you still are doing start to finish by hand, or are you able to outsource anything that?
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's all American-made companies that I'm working with. Some of the bigger stuff that I guess isn't the finishing work I'm trying to figure out. Mm-hmm. So getting the shape cut out, getting the mass amount of grinding done out there so it comes back, and then really honing in the heat treating. And there's a company up in Washington that's been helping me out with that. And they hit the heat treat so perfectly every single time. And then for me, when it comes down, I've been trying to learn how efficient can I be as like a single person making each one of these blades. So I've designed molds that are all in my garage for all the handles and everything like that, or jigs and fixtures that I can, route a profile of a handle scale out faster, or what knot on a lanyard works the best, and Yeah, it's fun. It's kind of like a lean manufacturing take on how to just make a really cool survival knife that has a, awesome leather sheath, and, it's just almost like an heirloom piece. So.
Yeah. No, it is an heirloom piece. Yeah. Absolutely. I think every piece that I plan on having from you in the future, it's like these treasured pieces. I think it's also really cool. Like, you're doing something that it's 2022. You said something great on the phone the other day, and it was like from San Francisco to blacksmithing, or the San Francisco Tech to blacksmithing, and it was the polarization of the two things. It is very, like, these are very opposing ideas, and yet in 2022, where, I think to leave politics aside, I think we are being made aware that there is not a lot made in America anymore. Yeah. And we've lost a lot of skill sets. Yeah. So that if we ever were completely isolated and needed to kind of independently run ourselves, we're in trouble in a lot of areas. Yeah. So I think what I love watching you do is, while we definitely need it in a lot more areas, you are like taking this on and you're doing it by hand again. And these are skills that if you threw me in a garage even with all of your equipment, I'd burn the place down well before I produced anything. So I think that's what makes you so special and makes us all just really excited for you, even though I'm not in this world.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
But watching, you're doing what like America is missing right now. And that's really fun. And
it's fun just how many people connect with it, and it's like, I think maybe we all just get caught up a little bit in our day-to-day routines and everything like that. But, I just started with this based off of having an angle grinder and a bucket of oil that I could quench blades in, and I bought steel from different places. And it's trial and error and just trying to figure it out. And yeah, I don't know.
You made your own destiny.
Yeah.
I just think that's cool. I just wish that's what I want to encapsulate with this, is just like, this is possible. It doesn't have to look like you. Yeah. It doesn't have to look like me. If there are things that interest you, pursue them.
Yeah. I not only want to tell people about all this stuff I'm doing, but I want to show them. Like, I want to go to these events and actually be like live forging different blade shapes and showing people how the steel moves, and how it's not too like a crazy weird of a skill, but it's just fun to get in there and swing a hammer and beat some hot steel and try and make something out of it. I've got Kat always I always tell Kat that there's plenty of blades that you all don't see, and because they look like burnt hot dogs, and I just throw them out.
Okay, so there is failure in there.
there's a lot of failure, a lot of burns, and
what's your worst injury? Just for intrigue.
From knife making?
Yeah, specifically from knife. Yeah, I should have been specific. I forgot.
I had a video the other day. Actually, a buddy came over, and there's a cool technique that you can do where you put a little water on your anvil, and it's actually a skill that the Japanese sword makers use, where when you hit it with water, it pops off all the impurities and scale from the outside, and it's like this shock that you send down because the water turns instantly into vapor. I got too good of a swing on one, and it sounded like a mini M80 or something like that.
Oh no.
And I had a slow-mo video of just all this glowing hot pieces just going boosh into my face. And one stuck right on my eyelid, and I've never, because it wouldn't come out, and when I opened my eye, it went into like the little crack,
Oh, dude.
And I was like, ah! And I was like, I thought it hurt so bad. It was just such a sensitive spot. It wasn't even like a bad injury, but it was just, I was sitting over in the corner like, that really hurt.
Yeah, well, anytime hot metal, and that's not good. All right, well, that's time for today. Thank you so much for being here. I've really appreciated this conversation and been looking forward to it. Like I've said before, I think what you're doing is really interesting, and I love that it's American-made. Working with your hands again, this trade that's been lost and you're bringing back. So Lost Sasquatch.
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of, where can people find you? You've got a website, lostsasquatch.com, and then on Instagram. Lost.sasquatch, right?
Yep. YouTube, all of them.
Awesome. All right. Well, go check them out, guys.